Hey, what's up? This is Kent with Drawing Product Ideas. I have something really great to share with you today. We're actually going to look at some of the most fundamental elements that you're going to find on pretty much any digital product screen, website, or digital experience. And we're going to take a look at how to draw them, and then we're actually going to put them together in a meaningful way. So hang in there with me. We have a lot of great stuff to share. Alright, let's start out by drawing some good old-fashioned text, and there's a very easy way to represent this in a UX drawing. So we're going to grab a heavyweight pen if you're working with a set. If you're not and you're only working with a uniball pen, that's fine. You can follow along too. Now if you think about how text looks in a newsreader app or a content-heavy website, think about it. When you squint at it, you'll notice that the text starts to look like a simple line. Now, text can serve many purposes and take on several forms. You can have headline text, subheader text, body copy, and image captions, for example. And we can use different weights for our lines to represent these different types of text. Let's pretend this line will be used as a headline. Now to do this, we can add a few extra lines to thicken the weight of our initial line. And if you're working with one of those uniball pens, you might draw two parallel lines and just scribble a fill in between them. Let's imagine that we want to represent a paragraph of body copy text below this headline. To do this, we can use a single stroke here, and we can add some parallel lines below and create the visual shape of a paragraph. I'll even throw in a small line at the end here for effect. So there we go. We have a nice looking text block with a headline followed by a paragraph. Okay, so that's one thing. If you think about it, all digital UIs contain content and text in some capacity. And this method for representing text, headlines, subheaders, and body copy is going to become very important. And as you can see, it's pretty easy. It's just a set of simple lines in varying weights. Okay, let's try another one. A lot of websites and news articles are going to have supporting images and photos. And when creating a UX drawing, it's not so much about drawing the actual image itself. It's about representing the image with some sort of symbol that acts as a placeholder. One that says, hey, there's going to be an image here. So to do this, we'll draw a box. Now, the aspect ratio of the box can be similar to that of the image. So perhaps if your image is square, then your box can be more square in shape. If your image is going to be landscape oriented, consider drawing a more horizontal oriented box. And finally, if your image is a portrait, then you can draw a box that is more vertically oriented. So here's my box. I can use the same pen for the next step, but in the spirit of visual polish, I'd like to add a little pizzazz here. I'm going to grab a lighter weight pen, and I'm going to draw a nice X connecting the corners here. This is a great symbol that suggests the box acts as an image placeholder, and it's a great symbol that works for any image, whether it's a larger hero image, a supporting photo, or even an icon image. Now, just to see what a set of icons might look like using the same symbol, I'm going to draw a set of small square boxes here. We can see this is starting to take shape now. Now let's jump in and add that nice last touch to suggest this is an image placeholder. I'm going to draw my X's in here. I might even just draw these in freehand since they're small. And if you're not confident in your ability to draw a straight line, use your ruler. There's no shame in that. There, now we have a set of icons. You'll notice that it looks like this could be the start of some sort of menu. Perhaps you might use a set of symbols like this to represent social media controls for sharing content. Really, it's up to your imagination here, and the possibilities are really endless. Okay, so let's do one last thing here. And pretty much every digital experience you interact with will have some sort of method for navigation. And if you think about the different methods for navigation, for instance, on a mobile device, you might see some sort of app bar at the header of the app or at the top of the layout. And in this app bar, there's typically a hamburger icon, and that is your affordance for navigation. So to draw this, let's start with a long horizontal rectangle to represent our app bar. Then we're going to draw 3 nice lines over here, and boom, we have ourselves an app bar. And that was pretty easy, right? You can imagine even perhaps handwriting a label at the center of the bar here that further describes the page that we're looking at. Another popular method for navigation is using tabs. And again, this is something that we frequently see on a lot of mobile apps. And to draw tab navigation, we're going to use the same technique. Let's start out by drawing a long horizontal rectangle here. Now, you'll notice my lines aren't very pretty, my angles aren't perfect, and that's okay because I'm just trying to create a basic symbol here that communicates an idea. I'm not trying to create the next fine arts piece that will be on display at the Met. So to create the actual tabs, let's think about how we represented text earlier, because each of these tabs are going to have their own label. So to represent text, you might remember we used a single line. We can do the same thing to represent tabs in our app navigation. And we're going to do that now. And I'm going to use my straight edge just to make sure that my lines look clean and they all line up and align nicely with each other. That's just going to add that extra level of polish that will help you draw like a designer. So here's what our tabs could look like. If you want to show an active tab, you can make one of the lines a bit thicker to represent a selected state. And you can even add accents like perhaps dots on either side of the line to show that this is the active tab. And of course, the rest of your screen and layout will appear above or below the navigation, depending on how your layout is arranged. All right, so we covered a few basic shapes here. We have symbols for different types of text. We have symbols for image placeholders. These actually work well for large hero images, profile images, supporting photos, and even icon bars as we've seen. And finally, we reviewed a few ways to represent app and website navigation. So these are our basic building blocks, those Lego blocks if you will. Now let's take a look at how we might combine them in a meaningful way. All right, so now let's put all of these elements together into some sort of layout. And just for the exercise today, let's use a newsreader app. I'm actually going to use this article screen from the New York Times. Now, I've always loved game shows. I found this wonderful article about Jeopardy contestants and champions, and we're actually going to combine the elements that we just drew and arrange them in a way so that we can recreate this basic article. And you'll see we have a headline here, we have a nice big cover image, and then we get into the content of the article. There's even some notes about the author and so forth as we scroll through this. So let's get started. Since our sample New York Times article is running on an iPad, let's draw the device as a way of framing our digital product screen. So to do this, I already drew a rectangle inside of a slightly larger rectangle in pencil, just so I have a frame of reference. And now I'm actually going to trace my pencil lines with my favorite pen. Now, I'm feeling like a bit of an overachiever today, so let's go ahead and add a couple extra features to our iPad. So first, we're going to represent the home button at the bottom of the device, and to do this, we'll draw a small circle. Next, we'll draw a small point at the top of the device to represent the camera, and I'm doing this for orientation purposes. Now, let's take a look at our example New York Times layout, and if we start at the very top, the first thing you'll notice is that we have a tab navigation bar running across the top of the screen. And in the actual website, this allows us to navigate through different sections of content. We'll use our aforementioned symbol for tab navigation and draw that at the top of our layout. You'll notice that all the elements in the article after the navigation will follow a nice, neat margin on the left, and everything here is really left aligned. So I'm going to draw a pencil line as a reference point, and all the symbols and items we draw after this will start on this line and move across the screen. So we're going to ensure that we have a nice margin here and that everything looks cleanly aligned in our layout moving forward. So next, and probably one of the most prominent elements on this particular screen, is the headline. Aside from the image, it's probably one of the first things that you noticed when looking at this article. So to draw our headline, like we mentioned earlier, we'll use our symbol for representing text. Now this time we're going to use a slightly different technique. This is for those of you who don't have access to a set of pens in varying weights. So to do this, we're going to draw two parallel lines. We'll connect them at each end to create a really long horizontal box, and then we'll start filling in the space between with scribbles. Now, since the text breaks onto multiple lines, we're actually going to show multiple lines of headline in our UX drawing because we want it to be real-ish and follow a real-world scenario as much as possible. Now, after the headline, you'll notice there's some intro content in the article. Again, we're going to use lines to represent that text, just like we did earlier. In this case, we'll use thinner lines to represent that intro copy, and here we go. Now, you'll notice after the intro text, there's a toolbar for sharing this article on your favorite social media outlets. So we're going to draw this next, and to do this, we're going to use a small set of image placeholder symbols. And I'm actually going to draw them all at once using my straight edge to make sure they're properly aligned. Just paying attention to alignment and details like that will also help you start drawing more like a designer and creating sketches and drawings that are easily interpreted and easier to read by the viewer. Now, finally, the article features a large hero image, and this is really meant to engage the readers. It's meant to really pull you into the content. And just like we did with the social media icons, I'm going to use a much larger version of that image placeholder symbol to represent this. Now, I think we can all agree this is starting to look like a substantial layout. Now, in real life, this actual page design goes on, and we can create a tall layout and use the same symbols to represent all of the features of this article and create a really tall drawing. But for this exercise, I chose to use the iPad as my border. So we're going to do a bit of a trick here. We're going to show that the page scrolls by drawing a quick vertical line on the right side of the screen, and then we're going to connect two horizontal lines partway down the vertical line to the actual border of the iPad. And you'll notice that this is starting to look like an impression of a scroll bar, and we can fill it in a bit here as well. Now, if I were to show this in a design review and I was asked about how much content the page would feature, I can actually point to this scroll bar symbol and speak to the idea of the page featuring any amount of content that we want. And because of this scroll bar, we now have a mechanism for scrolling through content and accessing any amount of content that we wish to feature on this page. So it's a really nice discussion point and helps us further frame this sketch. So there you have it. And if you think about what we just did, we reviewed several types of very basic elements. Think about the headline that we drew, how we represented text in the article, the image placeholder, even some of the sharing and social media controls. And these are like those Lego bricks, if you will, that I had mentioned in my first video. And if you think about those elements, we can combine them in different ways to really represent any UI, any website, any digital product screen that we can possibly dream up. So this season, we're going to be doing more of this, and I'm looking forward to drawing with you again in the very near future.